first of all, wow, I love this book. I love every aspect of it. Would you
Mhm.
tell me about the gorgeous painting that graces the cover of this book?
Oh, that's really a special painting. I was visiting Stephanie Thomas, who is a painter in Belgium, and she had just finished painting that painting and she had put it down to dry. And we were having lunch, and I kept looking at the painting. So much so, I excused myself from the table and I went over to the painting and I was just struck by it. So after the meal, I said to her, I just felt that there is a spiritual connection with myself and this painting. And I said, I just feel as if these roses, there were roses falling from heaven. And she smiled. She smiled. And she said nothing much. And then a few days after, I called her and I said, I would love if I could use that painting for a book cover. And she said she'd think about it. And then she called me back and she said, go ahead and use the title Zion Roses. And I was so thankful because I think that's a lot of what I do. I think I have spiritual connection with people and covers and things. And a lot of my poetry comes from that space as well. So yeah, I
Wonderful.
really love that cover as well.
So I'm really into the line, all I want is love, but love is hard to remember, from the poem Trombone Blues. It stuck with me because it's both simple and profoundly true. And these moments of simple truths play really beautifully in this book against the gorgeous details. Um, for example, in the poem Stilts, where you write daybreak images, scent of honey, fresh baked bread, crab cakes. My question here is, how do you decide when putting together a book like this, how and where these different techniques will be used?
Well, I want to say, first of all, when I'm writing, a lot of my writing comes to me through a sort of storytelling mode. So I will be reading and something just provokes a memory from my distant past or my present. And I just stop. I literally just stop and I think about what this moment is to me. And I just then say, okay, sometimes I resist the urge to put down what I'm thinking, but oftentimes I will put down what I'm thinking, and it usually comes out like almost a song because I hear music. I hear the music when I'm writing. I hear the music that tells me to pause. I hear when it stops, it breaks. So my poetry is very lyrical, I think, because I really hear the music. I hear drums, I hear the piano when I'm writing. I hear, background songs when I'm writing. So a lot of it. So all I want is love, but love is so hard to remember. That line, it just, it found its way into my soul. I just thought of an experience with, if you think of an experience with someone you really love, your partner, your husband, and you know that you have some really fantastic moments. And then the next morning or the next day or the next minute, something goes wrong. And it's as if you have forgotten everything that you just you are enraptured by. And suddenly you become very basic in your dailiness. Why did you not put out the garbage? Or why did you not pick the children up on time from school? So it's not that you do not love anymore, but it's hard to remember those special moments when you're doing your day-to-day living. So as a poet, I try to recall those moments, the special moments. I also try to recall like the crab cakes. That's another memory of going to visit my grandmother, and my mother and my grandmother would go in the kitchen when we before we even got up in the morning, and they would bake these crab cakes, and they would bake, so you remember the smell and the taste. So when I'm thinking about my mother or my grandmother, these are the things that come back to me and stay with me. And I find that it's so easy to put them on the page, because a lot of it, as I say, it's like telling stories, and it's like going back into the past and pulling not just my memory, but memories that I have been influenced by, memories of ancestors that have come down through the line. And I find that a lot of my work is trying to recover the voices of these ancestors, persons who are always in the rearview mirror. So yeah, and so it influences my technique in that first I write the story, and then before I even deal with poetics, but the lyrical nature of my poetry comes when I'm writing the stories. So it's usually that form. If I'm going to do a narrative poem, it's usually not. I hardly write narrative poems. I'm doing more of that now that I'm here. However, before, when I was writing Zan Roses, I didn't do much narrative work, but um I'm going more into that now, learning new techniques, of course, expanded my horizon at the same time. But the techniques, the poetics, it's something I do after I write the story, and I examine my work, and I say, okay, how can I improve it? John Keats says, poets, artists, we don't go to the place where we want to end up. We take circuitous journeys to get there. So you complicate your poem. How do you do that? You can, incorporate myths. You can incorporate just other daily experiences that maybe conflict with what you're writing. So it's always a challenge after I put down a story to then complicate my poem in such a way that it makes sense.
I love that. Thank you for that generous answer. I feel like that's really useful
Well, I hope.
in terms of reading your work, but also for writers.
Yeah, yeah.
So some of my favorite moments in this book come from the Basquiat poems. I would
Mm,
love to hear more about your connection to your inspiration of Basquiat and his work.
okay. Well, Jean-Michel Basquiat is like a brother to me, a brother who I feel very close to. Again, it's a spiritual moment again when I met Basquiat's work. I First of all, I got introduced to ekphrasis at Bennington, and I just found it to be very interesting, because I was already very interested in paintings and art. But when I attempted writing using the technique, I thought of persons who I actually started a thing with Vincent van Gogh, and I then said, well, okay, so I have a one or two of Van Gogh, and then I said, okay, let me look at something more contemporary. And my niece, who runs a gallery in New York City, she had introduced me to Jean-Michel Basquiat's work, and another person, Kehinde. So I explored reading their paintings, so to speak, bring it to life. So I was going to put narrative on their pictorial. And somehow Basquiat's work just got into me more. And I think that is, I hear his voice. I hear what he's saying. Um, Someone said I'm ventricularizing for Basquiat, but I really feel when I see a painting that he wants to say something more, and I find that I'm saying it. And the important thing is that he is so complex. He's not an easy painter to read. So I try to complicate whatever the poem is, but at the same time, it's simple. He was a youngster, and he was moving in the time with the wild crowd, they called it. And his work was rough, well, rough in the sense that it was not the neat and tidy paintings of the era before. So he came up with this in the 70s. So I think that that time was a very exciting time for painters, you know. Warhol and all of his contemporaries, you know, they had great fun in exploring. And if you recall, he started painting walls, right? He was a spray painter. So he actually crossed over, right, from spraying walls to mainstream. And that, you can imagine, had to be really, really a serious step that he made. And those are some of the things that challenged me in his work, that he did not necessarily change his style. He said, you need to accept me for who I am. And that's what I see. It's a bit of rebellion, but it's also a bit of asking persons not to pretend, but see what is happening around us, especially in the context of Black men and Black people. Because, you know, after a while, persons would say, oh, slavery is done, everybody's okay. But as we can see what's happening in the world, especially you and, you know, persons in the USA, you can see that Black Lives Matter movement has taken on a new life. And why is it so? I believe it's because of continuing disenfranchisement that have been passed down from the days of slavery. And I think Basquiat, although he is not overtly saying this, his work says it every time I look at a piece of his painting. That's what I see. I see the criticism. I'm seeing, why are we being held back? Why is it that we are still stifled? And I think that is the recurring message. And he, they say, is a genius. But even from that perspective, he's questioning, why are you calling me a genius? Yeah, he questions everything. And I'm hoping that in my poems, I'm also questioning everything for him. So I'm actually really, really happy to continue working. As a matter of fact, um, the current collection that I'm working on, I actually, 1/3 of my book will be dedicated to Basquiat's poems, paintings. My poems will be about Basquiat's paintings. So it's really um, fascinating, I would say, the relationship that I have developed. He gives me a freedom that when I'm writing, that I don't necessarily have when I'm writing other types of poems. He gives me a freedom. I have him meeting Van Gogh. I have him meeting my sister who just died. I have him talking with Bob Marley. He gives me this range and this breadth that allows me to explore who he was and who he would wish to have been if he had continued his life. And in a sense, through my poems, he is alive. And that's hopefully what you will find in the poems I'm writing about Baskin.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Mhm.
So just to open that question up in a broader way, who are the other influences in this book? And I guess I'm asking more about people who you didn't name or explicitly gesture to in the text, but who you feel like are in there.
Well, I definitely feel that Professor Edward Baugh, uh, retired professor in Jamaica, is in many of my stories. And why I say this is my lyrical voice, I think, because I got um, he was my mentor, my main mentor. I found that when I'm writing or when I'm telling my stories, I hear his voice, I hear his pauses. So although overtly again he's not there, but just in maybe methodology, in poetics as well, he is one who uses wit a lot. He is a great conversational person in terms of in his writing. So I've learned that technique. And I remember Major Jackson said to me, um, wow, you're way ahead of the game with this because a lot of persons don't have conversations in their poems. But I definitely picked that up from Professor Ball. And there's some of my poems that are very short and tight. And those I think I am influenced heavily by Professor Mervyn Morris in Jamaica, who is another very great and famous poet. So I think I had the best of, of, of the Caribbean influence in my work. And somewhere, either on the face of it or in the lines or in the tightness of the poems, I think you can always find my mentors. They're always there. They're always coming, showing themselves up in some form. But on the other level, my mother and my grandmother also influenced my writings very strongly. And I was surprised when this happened because I never thought I'd be writing about poems about my mother so much so I had to say I'm not writing anymore. you know, because but it shows how important a job mothering is. Because the things that you never thought you would learn, Lorna Goodison has a great poem, I Am Becoming My Mother. And and it is so true for me as well, that after many years, I recognize a lot of who I am. I'm really, again, a lot of who I am. I am reporting from my mother's life. And so as a mother myself, I take that into consideration. And for all mothers, and especially young mothers, I think they need to take that into consideration. But it reports in so many aspects of your life. And I think a lot of what you're seeing on the page is also coming from that space.
So my favorite poem in the book is The Other Left Foot, Please. I fell in love with Uncle Barry.
Yeah.
And I also really love some of the less clearly developed characters like Gloria and Duran, because I feel like Barry is so, in it, like I feel like I know him. And then, of course, the way you give us this poem about dancing, where the poem itself turns and turns and turns, it's just so masterful. And I'm always talking to my students about how they can try to achieve this, right? The marriage of form and function. So I'm going to ask you to talk about the process of writing this poem, if you don't mind, specifically what went into it. How did you start? And maybe if you want to talk about Uncle Barry, I'd be open to that too.
Okay. Yeah. And it's a very personal poem to me, as you can imagine, because it it takes me right back to when I'm 13, 14, 15, growing up, and Uncle Barry. Yeah. I actually it's a poem that really is just telling you, it's actually telling you about my life sort of on the underlays as a dancer, because I wanted to dance first of all when I was like before I was 10. 'Cause I had friends who did ballet and they were dancing, but I didn't get that opportunity because I was one of six and my parents couldn't afford to send me to dancing. So when I became a teenager and they opened Cultural Training Center in Jamaica, it was more affordable and I got the opportunity to do modern dance now, and hence Uncle Barry. But the important thing about it, I think, when you say that it's one the poem that you really love the most, it allowed me to pause and to say, wow, there is something special about it. And the special thing, I think, and I have seen that in other poems that people really are really attracted to, is that there is a strong emotional connection for you too. It there's a connect. So what I have is I have translated my emotional connection to dance and my love for dance in such a way, although it is not, oh, I love dance, in such a way that you were pulled in by the fact of my love for dance. And it was not a love story that didn't have trauma, as all dancers would tell you. It's a story that had many turns. So here it is. I started the first line by telling you that I did not have two days. I did not have ballet. So it's actually setting up the poem to say you don't have everything you want, but you must enjoy what you have. I think that to me is very important. Yeah. So I think it hits you with something realism, and people, I think people are attracted to that sort of story. So here again, it's a story. Uh, I love dance. I never thought I would stop dancing, but stopped dancing when I was 25 or 6. So I I I always hanker after dancing and go to as many dance shows and think. But when I'm writing now and I'm thinking of my life, my brief life as a dancer, I was just going through the stages when I was writing this poem. It's as if to say, why did I not dance before, and why did I stop dancing? So in that probably 10-year period, that's what that poem was trying to do. Not I wouldn't say it was not intentional, but technically I was trapped in a period of my life when dance was really important and critical to me. But of course, when you're doing this, so I actually had different moments in that 10 years. So I put down the important moments. So it was that you started to dance and you learned your bodies. So your body, became an instrument. So then you can compare your body to a flute. You can compare your body to any instrument, and the sharpness, the preciseness. This is what you tuned your body, and then you had the practicality of it now. So you became, you go to party and you wind down and you get up. So your body now is assisting you into maturity, into finding your sexual self. So these are the stages. But if I tell you this now, it sounds all great and well put together. But when I'm writing it, I don't think I contemplated these moments as I'm telling you now. But it because they actually happened. You see, that's it. For me, this particular poem, a lot of poems I would say are restored, but virtually every line in this poem is true. So this poem is unique in that it is very factual, one or two little shifts. And then you had a period when people were dying. People were dying from AIDS. And that was very horrific and painful. And then there was a period of migration. People were leaving. So so these are very hard stories, emotive stories, things that got you in your gut. So when you're writing about that 10-year period, you cannot not put them down. And then, but Uncle Barry, of course, was a man of great wit. And when we came to that, so of course that is what I think it sort of wraps the poem in a sense in the first three or four stanzas. It wraps the poem with a sort of lightheartedness, a fun that you go in there to have fun, and learn your body. And then, of course, you're going through the stages of learning. So what do you do? You make mistakes, and there are a few of us that made a lot of mistakes. So it was not only Miss G, right? We all made mistakes, but I have never forgotten when he would say to us, all of you with your two left foot, you please come back again and do over there. So he really said something like that, yeah? So the fact is that he probably said, lead with your right. And half the class went out with their half the class went lead, led with their left foot. So he of course turned it into a joke. It was a joke for Uncle Barry, but he was serious as a judge when he was saying it. So an onlooker would just say, my goodness, this guy is so great. So I've always remembered that line. So all you with two left feet, please go back to the corner and repeat the exercise because you've made a major mistake. And that was how his class was. He allowed you to learn, but you had fun. So I found it, although you're embarrassed sometimes, but you just go back and you then you lead with your right. So you learn. So the process was a learning process. And then, as I say, I mentioned already the sickness, the death, and then it's as if a lot of the dancers of my period just disappeared. And those I refer to as the phantom dancers. It's as if we never had them, we never experienced. And between the phantom dancers, whether they're dead or they have disappeared or they're just no longer in our lives, when we meet, we would always have a moment of silence. And I always internalize that to mean that we're thinking about them, thinking about the persons who we are no longer in touch with, but we're so tight with at one period in our lives. So I really find that that's how that poem came together. And then of course, you then put it down, you leave it, you leave it, and then you go back to it. And then you work at it for structure, your form, your the tightness of it. Each line, is there one word that is not necessary? You take it out. You want it as tight as possible because you want to get into that poem only what you need, only what you need, nothing extra. And that's what I think is the hardest part for me. But I am diligent and I'm becoming more diligent. I'm like in the dance class, I'm becoming more diligent. I'm working at my craft. And of course, you look at it. Do you have similes? Do you have metaphors? Are you going to write in couplets or are you going to use terse sets? You're going to go through. Do I have enough metaphors? Yeah. Am I going to be a Walcott on this poem or a Gregory Pardlo, who who of course their works are really fantastic in terms of use of metaphor? Am I going to be like Major Jackson and be lyrical and just full of, well, he also is very, very good at using metaphors, and I just thought I learned so much at Bennington from Gregory and Major that I am a blessed. I'm really blessed having been to Bennington. I must say that. Yeah, so that's how this poem came about, and I then worked at it in terms of the poetics and you know apply the learnings, that's the formal learnings, to the page. So some persons do it the other way. So it's I don't know if there's any right or wrong way, because some persons will put on the page the formal poem first, and then they will try to infuse the emotion. I I have to put the emotion on the page first, and then I work at it for preciseness and for the craft. That's how I do it. I don't know if there's any right or wrong way, as I tell you, but that's the way I find that works for me.
Nice. So the manuscript, like this actual book, the way it moves for me, we see all these different sort of creative pursuits. You move from visual art to dancing. And after the other left foot, please, we meet the dancing figure of Pitchy Patchy in a sequence of poems where you sketch different figures dancing.
Mhm.
I was wondering, is Pitchy Patchy a figure you invented, or does he belong
No,
to the
no,
culture
no.
you're from?
It's a cultural what should I say, figure, a cultural figure. All right. We have John Canoe in the Caribbean, and I believe it comes out of Africa, one of the African countries. And at Christmas, especially, it's a band of men that would dress up in masks, and some of them dress up like women, belly woman. So even the belly woman is not a woman, it's a man, usually with pillows and stuff and masks, and they carry like forks, and they really look scary. Children are really afraid of them. And we would actually cry when we saw them when we were growing up. But it is a dance form as well. So they would dance in the streets. And part of this dance is what I believe, that we have retained a lot of our African movement, the drumming sound, because you have the drums when you're doing jankuna. There's always the person with the drums, and you hear the drums before you actually see the dancers. So you are prepared, and you get, either you run under the bed, or you try to escape, or you go and meet them at the gate, or if you're on the road, you are usually as a child very alarmed, and your parents want you to see them because it's fun for them to see the reactions of the children. But yeah, it's an African form of movement. And I again think it is a part of, it's like a rebellion against what happened to them, the trafficking. It's we continue to sort of celebrate using these forms. But for me, it is, they carried these dance forms from Africa to the Caribbean, and it's the memory. We should not forget ourselves, and ourselves meaning our ancestry. And the drum is an important part. The dance is an important part. If you remember, Kumino Queen was the title of my first collection, and that is heavily into dance and dance forms again. And because it is that, I think, if I'm happy, I dance. And yeah, I want to dance. Like right now, I could dance. You have, there's just energy for me that translates into dance. Some persons can sit still when they're, I want to move. I want to gyrate. I want to yeah, some people in Trinidad would say they want to bust out and go down low, but it's really, and I think it's something in our DNA. I think dance. I am convinced now that dance is in my DNA, and that I don't know if you know about the concept where you actually can have your DNA can contain more than just physiological um, happenings. You can have other things traveling in your DNA. Like, for instance, there was a case that they have documented some time ago, where there was a war-torn country, and then all the children that were born within the 2 or 3 years after the war, they would not speak until they were 4 or 5 or 6. So they said trauma traveled in the DNA of those children, and joy can travel in your DNA. And I believe dance can travel in your DNA. And as an artist, I believe words and language can be an integral part of who you are, and your so it is your affinity to certain things that I think you may not know why, but you are influenced by a force that is greater than. And this force, I believe, is coming from your ancestors. So I am not sure I'm right, of course. It's very speculative, very speculative. But nevertheless, I believe there is sufficient evidence of how it is artisans evolved out of our people. Different types of artists. And if you see some young boys or girls in Jamaica, they don't get any formal training as painters. And if you see the work they can do, or dancers, and if you see how they can dance, where does this come from? Their parents can't dance, yet still they have this. So of course, research is not yet where it should be, I think, but I believe there's something there. And if we study it more, we may find out what that link is. And that's why science is an important part of life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Well, that's so great. I'm sad to ask my last question because I've
Yeah,
enjoyed I've enjoyed this so much, and I loved this book, and I loved Community Queen before it. And I hope that once COVID's like really in the rearview mirror and I can have a reading here, I would love for you to come and share
definitely.
your work with the people of New Hampshire. But so yeah, so my last question is really simple. It's just, what are you working on right now?
Well, I have a third collection that I would say, about 80% into. Um, I've been toying with names, um, but I have not decided one way or the other. I have two potential names, um, but it has to do, again. It's in three sections. The first section, again, I'm using phrases heavily in scene one and scene three, where it is I'm looking at the ships that carried the people from Africa and scattered them. So I'm naming ships now. So I'm holding the ships accountable as if the ships were persons. But in telling that story, of course, I'm holding European nations accountable, because it's easy for persons, especially on this side of the world, to say, "Oh, slavery is done. Why are you still harping on it?" But they have exploited. They have taken our land. There's been genocide, and and even down to the artifacts that they have in the museums. They're saying, "Oh, but I don't know if I can give you back what I stole from you." So I find it very interesting. So that's section, that's scene one. Then I'm looking at how the people move to the Caribbean and how the people move to the USA. The Caribbean voices are voices that of people who from Jamaica or and Trinidad, and so persons who continue to be disenfranchised, and you find that they're searching for home. So you find them moving again from Jamaica to the UK or to the USA, looking for home, looking for betterment. So that continued movement, searching for home, is scene two. And in scene three, I'm looking at Basquiat and how his paintings report this search for home, this search for betterment, this search for self, this search for equity, because that's what I think we're searching for, equity. And so that I have the structure in place. I have several poems in place. I just am working now to make sure it is the best book I can have. The poetics are as firm as they can be, and that it will be a book that will influence Caribbean literature in the future. So because we cannot forget. So my book is about we dare not forget. We should not forget, because part of remembering is going to help the healing. It's if you forget that you have a cut on your toe and you do not look after it each day and put the medication on it and put it in the sunlight and heal it, then you may lose your entire leg. So that is the spirit in which I am operating, that I would want the healing to take place, but it cannot be that we push things under the carpet, the rug, the bed. We want to put them on a pedestal to say, let us together find a way to make us all better. So that's how I would like to end, to say that let us together make things better.
Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. I love this
And thank you.
gorgeous book, and I
Thank you.
cannot wait to read what comes next.
Thank you so much, Rena. A pleasure. I love being here with you. Looking forward to in person sometime soon.